Welcome back!
Yay! Here we are, Wednesdays in the Word again after our little break for Christmas. I hope everybody had a really great holiday. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we're off to a bang.
Oh, are we?
Yeah. Oh, well. So we are doing, now we finished Genesis, the beginning of the Bible, and now we're going to skip ahead quite a bit in the Old Testament to the book of Daniel, which is an interesting book. There's a lot in it. There are 12 chapters of Daniel, so we'll take a chapter a week because as we get into it, we'll find that there's a lot in each chapter. So tonight is really chapter 1 today, whatever. We film at night. So
whatever year it is.
Yeah, this week is chapter 1 of Daniel. And it's, like I said, it's introductory. I think it's important to note here that this book is set in the time period when Judah, the southern kingdom, was captured or defeated by Babylon, and the people were carried off to Babylon. So just to kind of set a little bit of geography here. After Solomon died, the kingdom of Israel, or the nation of Israel, split into two because they couldn't make a decision on who was going to be king. The northern kingdom retained the name of Israel. The southern kingdom was called Judah, and Jerusalem was in the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was defeated and taken over by Assyria, probably about 50 to 70 years prior to this. And then that left the southern kingdom of Judah. This is also kind of during the time period when Jeremiah and Ezekiel are warning the people of Judah and Jerusalem that they better straighten up and fly right, essentially, or bad things were going to happen. And of course, bad things happened. In 605 BC is approximately when this all started. So that just kind of gives us, and the other thing for you to note is Babylon is in present day Iraq. That was the kingdom of Babylonia. Babylon was its capital, and that is near present day Baghdad. So
is this before King David's reign?
This is after.
After, okay.
Yeah. So David's son Solomon, still had the united kingdom of Israel, and it was after Solomon died then that there was division, and then many kings in between there. Some of them were good kings and some of them were bad kings, and they kept getting warnings and just, like we all do, they messed up.
Ignored them.
Right.
Fun fact, I learned last year that Ruth was King David's great-grandmother.
Yeah. In fact, I had that on a test for my confirmation students. They had to diagram King David's family tree. And another fun fact, so Rahab, the prostitute who helped the Israelite spies get out of Jericho, she married an Israelite named Salmon, and they give birth to Boaz. Boaz marries Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
Ruth and Boaz have a son named Obed. Obed has a son named Jesse, and Jesse's son is David. So the confirmation students had to diagram that family tree, and they did a really spectacular job of it too. So, especially with all those weird names. So we got weird names tonight or today too.
Eh, it was the time. Each name had a meaning, and so people think
Yeah.
of weird names, but it's kind of like today. Like, mine means peace, peacemaker, which
Yeah.
I am. It also means elf army. For fun fact,
Elf army.
elf army. Like I come at you like an elf army, like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Uh, mainly peacemaker though.
Yeah, I think that's probably better.
But names are important.
Yes,
So
they are. And we're going to talk about the importance of names and meanings of names tonight, because that figures into, kind of sets up the book of Daniel here. All right, I'm going to begin reading at verse 1. I'll read verses 1 through 5 just to get us started, and we'll talk a little bit about that.
okay.
In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. All right, so just something to kind of notice here. First of all, this devastation and destruction of Jerusalem and the temple being destroyed and the items being carried off is devastating to the Jewish people. It just completely rocks the nation, and because that's kind of where everything was centered around. Also, it's a major slap in the face, that he takes the temple items and carries them off and puts them in the storehouse of his false gods. And then I think also kind of important to note here, we've got young men who are kind of high-ranking, wealthy, well-to-do, who are taken and to be trained for a period of 3 years and given the food and beverage and everything of the region. And that will kind of figure in here. So what's happening here is that they're trying to assimilate them into Babylonian society.
I was gonna say, why does it matter when it says royals, like from the royalty family?
Well, that probably would have been, an even bigger slap in the face then, that they were taking the people from the royal family.
Oh, so the Babylonians took the royalty family from Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thousands of Jews were carted off to Babylon and to Babylonia. But it's interesting that and it kind of makes sense. I mean, if you want to really gut punch a nation, then you attack their leadership and their royalty.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what they're trying to do, is to kind of assimilate them into their culture.
Did they take Jews at this time, Jewish boys, to be, what was it, eunuchs?
Some of them did, some of them did become eunuchs.
Okay.
Yeah. But not the boys. That, although this Ashpenaz that is the chief of the court officials that's been kind of put in charge, he is, one of the translations that I read said that he was a eunuch. I don't know that makes any difference.
Mm.
All right.
Cool.
Do you want to pick up and read verse 6 and 7? Because we're going to kind of stop and talk about, you mentioned the importance of names, and so we're going to talk about the importance of the names here.
Okay. Verse 6. Among these were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael. Was that right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar.
Yeah, good. Belteshazzar.
Okay. To Hananiah, Shadrach. Yeah. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego.
All right. So we're going to talk about things.
My little puppy.
Yeah. So, and we know of these three, and we'll hear more about them later. But we know these three by their Babylonian names, don't we? They've kind of lived down in legacy by their Babylonian names: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if any of you have been a fan of VeggieTales, there's a great VeggieTales. I can't remember what the title of it is, but it's a great story. Actually, there's one on Daniel and there's one on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's called Rack, Shack, and Benny. And
Chocolate Bunny.
Yeah. We'll talk about that when we get to the chapter on the chocolate bunny. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about their names here. So Daniel's name is changed then. So here's another way of assimilating them into the culture, is to change their names and to strip them of their identity and give them kind of a new identity. Daniel's name in Hebrew means God is my judge. Hananiah's name means God is gracious. Mishael's name means who is what God is. And Azariah's name means God has helped. Now, the thing that's kind of important, you notice that each one of their names has the word God in it. You will see this anytime you see a name that ends with the letters EL, that is El is kind of short for Elohim, which is a Hebrew word used to refer to God. And then a lot of times you will see a name that ends with this kind of AH combination. And that stands, or is kind of shorthand for Yahweh, another word for God, actually the proper name of God. So Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Okay, so their names are very closely associated and have meaning with the God of Israel. Their names then are changed to reflect the false gods of Babylon. So Belteshazzar means Bel, which is the name of one of their gods, will protect. Shadrach means inspired of Aku, another one of their gods. Meshach, belonging to Aku. And Abednego, servant of Nego. So they changed their names again to strip them of their identity and their identity in God, in the one true God, and tried to give them an identity that associates with their false gods. It's interesting, I think, throughout the book, it seems like Daniel's the only one that really retains his Hebrew name. The others really come to be known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, even though they remain faithful to the Hebrew God. All right. Any other comments or questions on that?
No, because I didn't know any of that.
Now you do.
Now I do.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to pick up then in verse 8. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you. Daniel said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. All right, so kind of what we're talking about is integrity and their faithfulness to their culture and their religion. Jewish law has very clear dietary restrictions. So for them to eat the food of Babylon would have meant that they would have violated those dietary laws and codes. And so this thing about eating isn't a vegetarian thing. It's about being true to their culture and their religious heritage.
I also think God was being smart because he brought a little bit of science into it. Because if you eat nothing but, I'm guessing the meat was fatty and terrible for you, and the foods they ate, the sweets, and just the carbs they consumed is not good for your body, and gave Daniel like the insight of like, hey, like your body needs vegetables, clean vegetables, and water to fuel you, and you will become stronger and not lazy. And so I think it's smart to think of something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Even during those times.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I want to jump down to verse 17. Can you read verse 17, please?
Yep. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them in, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. Keep going.
Go ahead. Continue.
The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them. He found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom, and Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus.
All right. So it's kind of interesting. You know, the chapter starts off telling us when Daniel and the others are taken to Babylon, and then it ends with telling us when they left. So it's kind of giving us a time frame there. But I think the thing that's important to notice here, especially, you know, in 17 and following where you read, is that God gives them what they need during this time, because they have this integrity that they are staying true and doing what's right and staying true to their culture and the laws that God has given them. God rewards that by giving them what they need, and that is to give them wisdom and knowledge and understanding. And in fact, he gives Daniel the ability then to interpret dreams, which will figure greatly later in Daniel's story. He gets called upon this several times throughout his time there, and that kind of helps him rise higher in the ranks. So he gives them what they need, not only to survive, but also to thrive and do well. So you see that God is looking out for these 4 young men, even in the worst of situations.
Do you think he's showing Daniel more favor, I guess you could call it, because of Daniel's lineage? Because, like,
Possibly.
he could have just, it just makes me wonder, like, why Daniel? You know, because all four men were true, but for some reason, Daniel was just a little bit more special.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all special, but, like, he could
Right.
interpret dreams, and I don't think the other three could.
No, but the other three show great bravery, as we will see later in the story. And, it's kind of unfortunate that we don't really hear kind of the rest of their story, except just that brief little incident with them in the fiery furnace and stuff. But I would imagine that they were probably a great support and encouragement, the four of them, to one another. I think you're right. We only hear about Daniel, but I really think all four of them were faithful and true to their faith, and they certainly show great integrity and commitment.
Yeah, it's like, were they allowed to leave after that incident? Like, what happened in their lives? Where
Yeah,
are they?
yeah, kind of gets you wondering about a lot of things, doesn't it?
It
Yeah.
happens a lot in the Bible, though.
Right.
They talk about people, you never hear about them again.
Yeah, you hear about them once and then never again. Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at in chapter 1 here. It's kind of a short introduction to the book, but it kind of sets up for us here how this is going to play out through the rest of their lives. And it's important for us, I think, to remember these things as we continue throughout the book. The thing I like to do when I do studies like this and read things is to try and figure out, okay, now how does this apply to my life? And I think there are a couple of good takeaway messages from this. The first is that, the culture around us is constantly seeking to assimilate us, to get us to kind of be absorbed into the culture and to give up our integrity and our upbringing and who we are, our religion, our faith, and those kinds of things. And I think I take great encouragement from reading this, just seeing that there have been people who had those same kind of challenges, probably even worse than what we face, and remained steady and faithful. I think that's important. And then the other thing I think that is encouraging is just to remember that when we are faithful and when we are trying to be true to who we are, God gives us what we need to be successful in that.
Yep.
Any other thoughts on the beginning of Daniel?
No, but I wanted to know, thinking about this concept, COVID can't be your answer. What was probably the best thing that happened to you last year? Because everyone's like, this sucks, like all just negative, negative, negative. And I can think of probably at least 6 things that were the best moments of 2020 for me, which is huge. So I wanted to know from you.
Well, let me hear yours first while I'm thinking. Okay.
Probably my top one that I just am, I'm gonna toot my horn a little bit. I'm really proud of myself is excelling at my job, because I have only been there for a year, but I've been told that I'm doing exceptionally well. I got my yearly review back. There was some stuff to work on, but I think about when I started in 2019, not knowing anything and where I was compared to the year of 2020, and I'm just quite proud of myself for how far I've come. I work really hard, and I'm really good at what I do. I've kind of found my knack, but also just being able to have a job in 2020. I know a lot of people who didn't, and I know that's a struggle, but being able to have a job and not only like not have to worry about anything, because we never had to worry about our paychecks because our business did exceptionally well too. God was really blessing us in that way. And so I was able to excel and grow. And now this year I get to be even better. That's probably my top number one that I think about a lot.
Awesome. I think my number one probably is kind of similar to that. Initially when COVID happened and the pandemic happened and everything, it was right kind of toward the end of Lent, and we were going to be heading into Holy Week and Easter, and it was devastating for me and many of my colleagues, just to think about how are we going to do this? We're not going to be able to have, because we had to shut down our church buildings and we can debate on the wisdom of that, and it really doesn't matter. It was the decision that we made at the time. And even, the people of our church. And we had to kind of reframe how we looked at how do we be the church. So while it was a bad kind of panic thing, also it kind of pushed me outside of my comfort zone. I had to learn some things about technology that I really wasn't comfortable with. And I mean, I had never done a Zoom meeting or, some of those kinds of things. So I think that was good. And, even though we weren't able to gather in person for worship on Easter Sunday, I think about, all the churches that were broadcasting on Easter Sunday, there were many areas in the country where the internet broke, just because it was just so much. And I think that's pretty cool that the gospel was proclaimed in new and different ways. And so that's an exciting thing. So there have been good things that have come out of that. I never would have done this kind of Bible study if it hadn't been for that. So
I wouldn't have been able to be a part of it.
Right. Good
That was
question.
cool too. Like, our churches were open, but I never went because one, I didn't want, I wanted it for space for people who need it, but it also did the same thing that you were just saying, is like, okay, how do I do this? Like, what is the church and how do I do this outside of a physical building? And now I don't currently go to my church, and I don't watch the online services there. I mainly watch yours. That's because you're my mom. But but also I just realized that I don't need a physical place to feel his presence. Like now,
Right.
I get outside like that. Oh my gosh. For those of you on this Zoom meeting, when you watch it, I cannot begin to describe a day which happened this past weekend. On Saturday, you could see all the mountains, and I'm in a bowl, and then there's ocean, and it was every time I see it, every single day, it takes my breath away. Mount Rainier, like, she's the most beautiful mountain, in my opinion, because she's just so majestic, and I am like, that.
Yeah.
Like, you made that, and people get sick and tired of it, and I'm like, how? It's just so crazy beautiful.
Yeah,
and
we've learned to appreciate the beauty around us, and we've learned to appreciate new ways of being a community of faith, I think. Yeah. All right, well, we're going to end this now. Thank you very much for joining us. We were happy to have you with us, and we'll look forward to having you next week. We'll do Daniel chapter 2.
Yay! Bye!
Bye.